You have the spreadsheet. You have the bookmarks. You have the list of things you are going to do someday once you figure out the right approach. You have spent hours researching. You have watched the videos. You have compared the options. You have taken notes that nobody will ever read except you. And at the end of all of it, you feel like you have accomplished something. That is the part that makes this so dangerous, because it feels like progress. It feels like you are getting closer. It feels like all of this research and planning and organizing is the responsible thing to do, the smart thing, before you actually begin. But here is the question you have not asked yourself yet. When does the preparing end and the doing start? Because if you are honest, really honest, you have been preparing for a long time now, and the thing you are preparing for has not moved 1 inch closer to being real. You know the specific feeling I am talking about. You open a new tab. You search for one more thing. You read one more article about how other people did it. You watch one more video that promises to show you the exact right way to start. And when you close the laptop, you feel a little better. Not because anything changed, but because the act of researching tricked your brain into believing something did. You are not lazy. You already know that. But try explaining that to the version of you that watches another week pass with nothing to show for it except a longer list of things you now know and a shorter list of things you have actually done. There is a reason this pattern has such a hold on you, and it is not the reason you think. Most people will tell you that procrastination is about poor time management. It is not. At its core, procrastination is not a time management problem. It is an emotional regulation problem. Your brain is not failing to organize your calendar. Your brain is protecting you from something it perceives as a threat. And the specific form of procrastination we are talking about here, the kind that disguises itself as preparation, is the most sophisticated version of that protection. Because it does not look like avoidance. It looks like diligence. It looks like being thorough. Other people even praise you for it. Here's what is actually happening inside your head. When you sit down and plan something, when you map out the steps, research the tools, outline the approach, your brain activates the same reward pathways it would activate if you were actually doing the thing. The same sense of forward motion kicks in. The same satisfaction registers. Your brain literally cannot tell the difference between planning to act and acting. So you get the emotional payoff of progress without any of the risk of failure. And that is why planning is so addictive. It gives you the feeling of moving forward without ever requiring you to leave the spot you are standing in. Think about the last time you spent an evening deep in research for something you wanted to start. You closed the laptop feeling good, accomplished even, but what did you actually produce? What exists now that did not exist before you sat down? If the answer is more knowledge in your head and nothing in the world, that was not preparation. That was your brain giving you a hit of progress without any of the cost. This is not a character flaw. This is a design feature of a brain that evolved to avoid threats. And in the modern world, your world, the threats are not physical. They are emotional. The threat is finding out you are not as capable as you believe you could be. The threat is putting something real into the world and having it fall short. The threat is the gap between the person you imagine yourself becoming and the person who actually shows up when the work starts. That gap is terrifying. And your brain figured out a long time ago that the easiest way to avoid facing that gap is to never stop preparing. Because while you are still planning, you never have to find out. Here is the part that makes this different from ordinary procrastination, the part that nobody talks about in those videos you have watched on this topic. While you are still planning, you can still be perfect. Let that sit for a moment. While the project lives in your head, it is flawless. The business idea is brilliant. The creative work is exactly what the world needs. The course is comprehensive. The thing you are going to build is going to be remarkable. You are the person who could do something extraordinary if only the conditions were right, if only you had a little more information, if only the timing lined up. The plan is the last place where the ideal version of you gets to exist unchallenged. And every time you add another layer of research, another comparison, another round of due diligence, you are not getting closer to starting. You are building a thicker wall between yourself and the moment where that ideal version gets tested against reality. That is what the preparation is actually protecting, not the project. You, your image of yourself, the version of you that is brilliant and capable and destined for something significant. That version cannot survive contact with a rough first draft. It cannot survive a mediocre first attempt. It cannot survive being seen before it is polished. So the preparation keeps going. And the ideal version stays safe. And nothing gets built. I know this because I lived it. I spent months, longer than I want to admit, researching side projects while I was stuck in a job I wanted to leave. I studied niches. I analyzed competitors. I watched videos about starting newsletters, YouTube channels, service businesses, freelancing. I had opinions about markets I had never entered. I would sit down with friends and share everything I had found, the opportunities, the strategies, the gaps no one was filling, and they would look at me like I was building something. I felt like I was building something, but I was not building anything. I was performing the role of someone who was about to build something. And the performance was so convincing that I believed it myself. Meanwhile, I watched people around me, people with less information, less research, less ability to articulate a strategy, start things, imperfect, messy, unpolished things. And those things worked, not because they were better than what I had planned, but because they existed. They were real. Mine was not. And here is the part I did not want to admit for a very long time. The reason I kept researching instead of starting was not because I needed more information. It was because starting would have forced me to find out whether I could actually do it. And I was not sure I could survive that answer. Now, here is where I am going to say something that is going to be uncomfortable, and I am not going to soften it because someone needs to say it to you directly. You are not being thorough. You are hiding. The research is not getting you ready. It is keeping you safe. Safe from failure, safe from judgment, safe from the possibility that you might try your hardest and it still might not be good enough. And the difference between being thorough and hiding is the difference between moving forward and staying exactly where you are for another 6 months, another year, another stretch of time that you will eventually look back on and wish you had used differently. You already have enough information to start. You had enough information weeks ago. maybe months ago. The reason you keep gathering more is not that the information is missing. It is that starting is frightening and researching is not. But here is what nobody tells you about the fear of starting. It does not go away with more preparation. It gets worse. Every additional hour you spend planning instead of doing adds another layer of expectation on top of the thing. The project gets bigger in your head. The stakes feel higher. The gap between what you have planned and what you could actually produce on day one grows wider. You are not reducing the pressure by preparing more. You are inflating it. You are building a version of this thing that no first attempt could ever live up to, and then using that impossible standard as the reason you are not ready yet. That is not preparation. That is a trap you built for yourself, and you have been living in it so long it feels like home. So here is the reframe, and I need you to hear this clearly because it changes everything about how you approach this. You do not have a productivity problem. You do not have a discipline problem. You do not even have a procrastination problem, not in the way you think. You have an identity protection problem. The planning is not about the project. The planning is about you. It is about maintaining the belief that you are the kind of person who could do something remarkable without ever having to prove it. And the moment you start, you trade that comfortable belief for an uncomfortable reality. The reality of a first version that is messy and incomplete and nowhere near what you imagined. But here is the thing about that messy first version that changes everything. It is the only version that is real. Everything else, the plans, the research, the strategy documents, the spreadsheets, those are fiction. Beautiful, detailed, reassuring fiction. But fiction, they do not exist in the world. They do not help anyone. They do not generate feedback. They do not teach you what works and what does not. They just sit in your head, keeping the fantasy alive. The plan was never going to become the thing. Things become real when you make them badly with whatever you have right now. And then you make them a little less badly the next time. And a little less badly again. That is how everything that exists in the world got built. Not by people who waited until the conditions were perfect, by people who started before the plan was finished and let the doing teach them what the planning never could. Because planning gives you the illusion of control, but doing gives you something planning never will. Feedback, real, specific, useful information about what actually works and what does not. You cannot get feedback from a spreadsheet. You cannot get it from another video. You can only get it by putting something into the world, however rough, and watching what happens. Feedback is the only thing that teaches. And you have been starving yourself of it for months while calling it preparation. And I want to say something about the people you watch succeeding while you are still researching. The ones who seem to have less information than you, less preparation, less analytical ability, fewer frameworks. They are not smarter than you. They are not braver than you. They simply decided at some point that a bad first version was more valuable than a perfect plan. That is the only difference between you and them. They gave themselves permission to be terrible at the thing before they got good at it. You have not given yourself that permission yet. And until you do, the research will keep feeling like progress while keeping you in exactly the same place. So here is what I want you to do. Not 10 things, not a system, not a new plan. 3 things that are small enough to actually do this week. First, set a research deadline. Not a starting deadline. You have tried those before and you know what happens. You just push them back. A research deadline. Pick a date within the next 7 days. When that date arrives, the research phase is over. Not because you have found all the information, because you are making a decision that the information you have is enough. Write the date down somewhere. You will see it every day. The deadline is not about readiness. It is about making a conscious choice to stop hiding behind preparation and admit that you are as ready as you need to be. Second, make the worst version. Whatever the thing is that you have been planning, the project, the business, the creative work, the first step, make the most embarrassingly rough version of it that you are willing to let exist. Not a good version, not even a decent version, the worst version you can tolerate. Record the terrible video on your phone. Write the awful first page. Send the imperfect message. Build the ugly prototype. The bar is not quality. The bar is existence, because a terrible version that exists in the world teaches you more in a single day than a perfect version that lives in your head teaches you in a year. You learn more from one bad attempt than from 100 hours of research about how to make a good one. Third, stop talking about the plan. This one is going to sting because it takes away something you did not realize you were relying on. Every time you tell someone about what you are going to do, every time you share the research, describe the strategy, lay out the vision over coffee, your brain registers that conversation as progress. You get the social reward of being seen as someone who is building something without having to actually build it. The talking becomes a substitute for the doing. So until you have something real to show, even something rough and unfinished, keep it to yourself. Let the only evidence of your effort be the work itself, not the plan for the work, the work. I want to be honest with you about what happens next. These 3 things are not going to feel good. Setting the research deadline will feel premature, like you are cutting yourself off from something you still need. Making the worst version will feel humiliating, like you are betraying the vision you had for this thing. Not talking about the plan will feel like you are losing something, and you are. You are losing the comfort of the fantasy, the warm, safe place where you get to be the person who could do something amazing without any evidence that you cannot. But here is what you gain in exchange for that discomfort. A chance to find out who you actually are when you stop preparing to become someone and start being them. And I know that is terrifying. It should be. Because the version of you that exists on the other side of starting is not the polished, perfected one you have been planning toward. It is something harder and messier and more honest than that. It is real, and real is always harder than imagined. But it is also the only thing that counts. You have spent a long time getting ready, and I understand why. Getting ready felt productive. It felt responsible. It felt like you were doing the hard work without having to face the hard part. But the hard part was never the work. The hard part is letting go of the version of yourself that only exists inside the plan and finding out what you are actually capable of when you stop researching and start building. You do not need more information. You do not need better conditions. You do not need the perfect moment or the perfect tool or the perfect amount of clarity. You need to do the thing badly, incompletely, with whatever you have right now, and let the doing teach you what years of preparation never will. One step this week, not the right step, just a real one. The preparation is over. Not because you are ready, because ready was never the point. And remember, you are in a marathon of life, not a sprint. Thank you for staying until the end. That says something about you, and I think you already know what it is. If there is someone in your life who is fighting the same wall, send them this. Sometimes knowing you are not the only one changes everything. If this channel feels like a voice worth keeping close, please subscribe. There is more ahead, and it is built for exactly where you are going. I will see you in the next one.